Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in. Hi, Roshni.
Hey, Tom. How was your summer?
Summer has been really good. I've had a great summer. I've gotten a lot done. I really got through a lot of my freelance work. I had a real busy summer with freelance, and now I have some time. I've been working on rewrites of some of my older scripts, taking all the stuff I've learned over the last year or so, and really getting fine-tuning them, getting my, it's not that there was problems with the story so much, because, I'm really good on structure, but it's all the other things I always work on, like dialogue and not being too on the nose and subtext, and really making it more polished and professional in that respect.
Which were you writing new ones, or were you reworking?
Except for writing some proof of concept scripts for my older materials, I've just been working on fixing the scripts I've written. And maybe that's a question we could talk about in another episode, but sometimes people say, just write new scripts, just write new scripts. Don't worry about your old scripts because they're too bad. You can't fix them. But I like those stories so much, I want to fix them. I want them to be really good.
I mean, we're here now. We might as well talk a little bit about it. I get the thought, but at the same time, I think sometimes you need to move on. I don't think it's a matter of they're not fixable. I think it's just you need to move on. Like you collectively, not you personally. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
like for example, back in my photography days, I remember I was going for a photography job right out of college, and I was showing off my portfolio to all these newspaper recruiters, and everyone thought it was great except for the one paper that I really wanted to work for. And the editor was like, I've seen these before. What new things do you have? She didn't care that it was the best. She wanted to know I was still working on my craft. So I don't think they're not fixable. And also film is a collaborative medium, so you can always kind of fix it on the fly. Like the actors might come up with a different way of saying things, or they'll shoot it a certain way. But it's more like if you're not working on new things, you're just being stale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I've got some new ideas I want to work on, but I think these scripts have shown real potential. So
yeah,
it's not so much, being stuck on them, like not getting past them, because I have a lot of projects. It's I'm more of in the economics of it. Like I invested a lot of time into this, and I want to, make sure that has some value at some point.
That's true.
I don't look at them as just, well, no, I'm trying to sell them, that kind of thing, So I just want, and part of it is, I want to say educational too, going back and reviewing your old stuff and seeing how much better you can make it. Certainly educational, has value. So that's kind of what's been going on for me. How about you?
Well, book 4 in my fantasy series is coming out in October.
I know that.
Really exciting. And this is probably the first time, it's the only time, because I just started writing a couple years ago, but the first time I've been able to release 2 books in a year.
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh.
I'm very proud of myself for that. I would love to release at least 2 a year. And I'm about halfway through book 5 right now. So if all goes well, I can release it in early 2024. But it's a weird thing. It's like I'm trying to give myself a deadline without giving myself a deadline. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, I mean, I don't know what other authors do. Is that normal for most, established, published, industry published authors? Do they do more than one book a year? Or?
It actually depends on, published, I don't want to say published, publisher authors, like authors with a publisher house, usually only do 1 a year. And it is a long process. We just had an interview, which will be coming up in a few weeks, you guys, with Jane L. Rosen. And we talked about how it is a long process, right? It takes, I think she said her book from start to finish was a year. The writing, sending it to an editor, repolishing it, packaging it, blah, blah, blah. That was a whole year. But publishers have that kind of lead time, and they give you an advance, right?
Right.
Indie authors, because trust me, I am a freaking research, like, I go down the rabbit hole on everything. And so I've been doing a lot of marketing on research for indie authors, which is what I am. And they say a lot of times it's like being a content creator, like YouTube or something. It isn't, I mean, you do want quality work, but you kind of want quantity out there because it might not be your first book that hits, it might be your 10th. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have something already in the queue, when they pick up that book, they're like, "Ooh, I want other things." And then you have nothing to show for it, then you just lose your audience. But like if you have like 10 books out and they pick up 10 and they love 10 and 10's a runaway hit, you also have 9 other books that they can pick up and read. And then they'll want
Mm-hmm.
more after that. A lot of indie authors say they don't even hit their stride until 30 titles
Wow.
out. That's when they start seeing the sales come in. And if I was I'm still kind of a hybrid, you know, I'm not a full-time writer in that respect because I still do acting and other things as well. So I would say I'm like a 3/4 half-time writer at this point. I think 2 a year is probably where I can safely do output as long as nothing else happens in my life, you know, that derails me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I could, I ideally, I think 4 a year, but I think that might be asking for too much out of myself and my editor. So, to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that they're YA fiction, I guess if you look at just pages or numbers of words, that kind of thing, your quantity is not half, but it's less than like a Stephen King or um, Pritchard or whatever. Those kind of novels are longer.
That's true. I mean, and, you know, again, like, and all the advice I've been reading, one thing that people mention, and I thought this was interesting. This is a little tangent too, but they were saying, like, for example, if you're putting out, I mean, it's just like any other art, right? Like the first, I'm sure Steven Spielberg's, you know, first film wasn't amazing, or George Lucas's first student film wasn't amazing. It had potential, but it wasn't like, oh my God, it's Star Wars. Oh my God, it's ET, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the more you put out, the better you get, but you have to put it out into the marketplace. And one of the things I've read is people are like, look, you'll do better to write, you know, 50,000 word novels versus like your one magnum opus that's 300,000 words. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Because you learn more
right.
the more you're outputting. And I thought this was interesting. This was another point brought up uh, because I am, you know, screenwriter and author. So I got what they were saying. Books are the only place where, as a creative medium, we're like, hey, it's cool that it took you like 2, 3, 4 years to output this one thing. Like, can you imagine if, like, you know, you took that long on a film, you'd be bored of it, you'd want to move on. Or like if you took that long on like a YouTube video or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, but they're like
Right.
books are like the
Mm-hmm.
only medium that we're like, it's cool that it took you that long. And in a way, maybe you should learn to work a little faster because you get better the more you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought that
Right.
was an interesting point.
Yeah. That is interesting. Well, we've been keeping busy, and this would generally be our back to school. We like to call it our back to school episode. This is
It
the
is our
beginning of
back
our
to school. People are still going to school. They just aren't going to work because of the strike.
right. Yeah, but the industry is not back in session, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we have been watching it carefully, and there hasn't been a whole lot of movement. Actually, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of shuffling of the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, so to speak.
I mean,
But
they've shuffled. They just haven't really arranged them in a nice order. You know?
well, that's part of what the union has been the WGA has been saying is that they're just rearranging the same offer in different ways to try to make it look nicer,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing. They haven't really budged that much.
Okay, so before we get too far into strike talk, to clarify, we are recording this towards the end of August. So things
Who
might
knows?
change. Who knows? Because we,
Things
you
could
know,
change.
there's a few weeks before we put this one out. But just to clarify where we're at in the timeline, we don't think anything's going to change. If something changes, we'll throw it in the show notes or add an addendum. But I highly doubt at this
Right.
rate anything's going to change.
Especially because literally the last thing I read was that the headline from Hollywood Reporter is talks between writers studios at a standstill after
Yeah.
a week of trading barbs.
Yeah.
So the studios made a big deal about getting all the head honchos together with the Writers Guild team, and then as the Writers Guild kind of stories came out, it was like it was basically the adults talking down to the kids saying, this is why this is a good deal and you should take what we offer you already.
Well, and I think this was the second failed talk, I believe. I think there was one, oh, I should look at the dates. I want to say there was one like 2 or 3 weeks ago before this
Wasn't
one.
that the talk about the talk?
Well, they were gonna meet. It was like a Friday, and they
Yeah.
met, and like nothing happened, and then like nothing happened again for a week, and then they were supposed to talk again, and they were like, "Well, here's what we have," but like they still didn't address the things that the Writers Guild wanted to address. So
Hmm.
I feel like this was the second failed talk within a month period.
Right. And it's funny because literally today's story on the strike was that the AMPTP hired a new PR firm.
I saw that.
And
Oh
I'm
my
like, what?
word.
What do they think a better PR firm is going to do? Just make them look better? It doesn't matter what the public thinks. It's only what the Writers Guild and its members think.
Well, this is funny. I was having coffee with a friend the other day. I should probably probably look this up, but we were just chit chatting about the strike because we're both industry, and she mentioned that Dune was delayed. The release was
Yeah,
delayed
I
because
saw
of the
that.
strike, and I guess, and I don't know. I haven't paid attention to anything around it, but she said that apparently the studios kind of put it out to the public like, oh, because of the strike we can't release it, oh, you should be upset at your favorite actors and writers because we can't release it because they're striking. And it backfired, and the audience was like, we know it's done, we just want to see it, can you end the strike so we can watch this movie?
Oh, really? They're like, we want the movie. The public is not that sympathetic to the writers, although I think compared to like previous strikes, there's been more public through social media and YouTube and everything. There's been more public information available about what the strike is about and what both sides want, especially on the writer's side. They've
Hmm.
been very outspoken. People like Adam Conover and Justine Bateman have been on Twitter and on YouTube, really trying to explain it to the world to show people that writers are not just, we're not all super rich people living off
Yeah.
residuals and stuff, and how the changes to the system have affected us, which I don't think most people even, most average Americans don't understand how the Hollywood entertainment system works. They just think we're all a bunch of elites or whatever.
You know what's interesting about that, actually? um so I watched a lot of YouTube, I know you do too. The people who are sympathetic, I think, are people who are very industry adjacent. Like, they, do commentary on films, or they review them or something. Very like it's a one-off. But the people
Hmm.
who seem less sympathetic, I've noticed, are the ones who were already having like what's the word? Like the superhero movie fatigue, or they were sick of the remakes. So they're kind of like clean house because you weren't giving us quality anyway. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
I've noticed as far as like in the influencer sphere of YouTube. It falls into one of two camps. And the people who are sympathetic are neutrally sympathetic. They're like, yes, this is important. Okay, we're sorry we can't give you like the content we normally would because of the strike. And then the ones who are very like vocally like, I don't wanna say they're not against the strike, they just don't seem to be as, like, caring about it, is because they're the ones who all the time were saying, "Guys, Hollywood needs to change and write better material and write
Hmm.
original stuff and not do remakes." So I think that's interesting. I don't know.
I've seen that too. Yeah, the more general Hollywood entertainment, podcasts or YouTube channels, especially some I've watched, have been very negative on the writers' side of it.
Really?
Yeah, they've been thinking we're whiners, that we don't like you said, the work, what you're putting out isn't worth what you're getting paid. But they also they really haven't especially these big blockbuster things that have failed recently. A lot of the some of the DC stuff and some of the Marvel stuff have been less than stellar. You got to understand there's a lot of studio involvement in that. A lot of times
Yeah.
some of the reason, the script that the writer hands in is not the one that gets made.
Yeah. And you're writing for a committee and for politics. I hate to say it. And
Hmm.
I don't even mean when I say politics, I'm not talking like, the woke agenda or something that, is like the big buzzword on YouTube that people either love or hate. I'm talking about, you know, if it's your first writing gig, you're going to write what they want you to write. It's just like any job, right? You're going to
Hmm.
do what they want you to do because you want to make sure that you keep your job. It's only when you're like, Quentin Tarantino status that you can write what you want.
Right.
So, I mean, it sucks that we do get all the remakes and all the stuff that everyone, bellyaches about, but like there's politics involved.
Hmm. And that affects a lot of times that affects the story. In fact, I
Yeah.
just finally watched the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League. And remember, this was the movie that was originally filmed by Zack Snyder. Then it was turned over to Joss Whedon, and that's what they released in the theaters, which bombed. And then Zack basically reshot, 80% of it and did it was basically a whole different movie. It was really good. I actually really enjoyed it. But that's a situation where the studios, you know, took over, replaced, the director, and did a momentously bad job of quote unquote fixing what they thought was wrong with it.
Hmm.
So if they want to complain about writers or not doing a good enough job, they have to give the studios their due too. A lot of times
Yeah.
their interference in the creative process does not benefit the product.
It's a weird
Yeah.
it's a weird balance.
So yeah, so I mean that's just I feel like some of those reporters are looking at the overall output of Hollywood and putting it all on the writers when it's really not. Writers are unfortunately not the people who have the final say. They have
Yeah.
more control over TV than they do film, but
Yes.
it's still a
That's true.
studio. They're still calling the shots, and you
That's
want to
true.
get
Yeah.
renewed, so you do what your boss says.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is true. Actually, I don't think the average Joe either realizes that. Like, when you're a writer, when you sell that property off, especially for a film, like, that's the director's baby at that point. They get to do whatever they want with it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think only in TV and film, and again, it really depends on the show. Like, I know, for example, the Walking Dead writers had a lot of say, and I
Hmm.
think some of them might have even been the showrunners. And I only know that because I attended workshops where they mentioned that the writers had that much say over, casting or over, how it was filmed or whatever like that. It doesn't always
Hmm.
happen. A lot of times you let go of it and it's not yours anymore.
Yeah. And even if you're still on the project, you might sell a project. And I actually just heard some recent stories about this. You sell a project that is, so it's plot A is is the story. And
Mhm.
when it finally gets produced, it's nothing like it was originally going in. You're still running the show or you're still, writing the script, but it's not what you initially intended. So
Yeah.
you have to compromise in this business because it's not a one person thing. No, you don't control things from beginning to end
Unless, of course, you raise the funding
unless
yourself,
you're doing it all
and it's
independent.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
if you're selling it off to, like, a major studio or something, that's different.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's kind of even like, remember back remember back in the old days, but, like, no, like, the golden age of Hollywood, the studio system, you wrote for specific studios, you acted for a specific studio,
Right.
and if a different studio wanted you, they hired you out. I
Right.
mean, it's the same thing, you were a contract gun for hire.
It was a very different world. I mean, it was literally you went to work 9 to 5, writing a TV show or writing movies for a specific studio,
Yeah.
and they had their own actors at that studio locked in.
Yep.
So that's why you would see a lot of the same teams of writers and directors and actors all working on the same films together for over and over and over again. They were basically like you said, like a factory for those kinds of films.
Well, I guess the downside of not having the studio system is that people aren't developed anymore,
Right.
because they would develop the talent. But at the same time, the upside, I suppose, of what we have now, aside from the money woes, which is not an upside, is you have more creative freedom in theory.
Hmm. Right, but that was going right into what I was thinking was you don't have the development of the writers' room with people starting at the low end and working their way up
Mhm.
because they're trying to turn this into a gig job where they can hire an established writer and say, come in and write a script and be done with them, or have a mini room where they write all the scripts, before they even buy it. And
Mhm.
then they don't have to hire these people for 10, 20 weeks or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then that goes to the AI question that's been coming up is, the latest news is that, AI generated material cannot be copyrighted. So the theory goes that the studios basically want to have writers basically put their finger on an AI generated project so they can say that it was a human generated project and copyright it. How much, if it's like a day to go over a script and tweak it or polish it, or a couple of days or a week, it's still not getting paid or getting a job as a writer, really. It's like a gig job.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I mean, this is taking it a little bit out of the writer's realm, but it all affects us. I don't know if have you gone on Instagram lately and seen, or YouTube even, there's a lot of like older actors or current actors where they so there's a lot of like AI generated Audrey Hepburn images that I keep seeing because
Hmm.
she's one of my favorite actresses. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I've seen all her films and I'm like, I don't remember that picture. And it's just like somebody AIing her like in random things.
Hmm.
Or like it's actually a very popular channel. I forget the name of it, but they reimagine like, you know, Harry Potter as the Godfather, or Star Wars, but it's, in this
Right.
kind of setting,
I've
and it's
seen those.
definitely
Yeah.
AI generated. Oh, yeah, like Star Wars if it was Wes Anderson or something
Wes
like that.
Anderson. That was exactly what I was
Yeah,
thinking. Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny, but it's also, and you can tell that they're not the true actors because 'cause it's got a little, like, uncanny valley to feel to the
Hmm.
faces, but you think, those actors didn't give you their approval to do this, and that's what we're fighting for. You know what
Right.
I mean? You can take, and we'll get to that point where my eye doesn't understand anymore that that's a fake,
Hmm.
you know?
Right. They're really,
So
really good. Those Wes
yeah,
Anderson ones are very good.
yeah. You chuckle and you think they're clever, and they are clever. I'm not saying that it's not a clever concept. It's just, what do we do when we get to that point? And I don't think I don't think people understand. And it even was making me thinking, like, we're fighting for it in our industry or against it or just regulations, and like other industries I don't think get it because like they're not affected, but like what do you do when it's like an
Oh,
AI
they're
nurse
affected.
taking your job, or like an AI engineer designing your bridge, or you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's going to get to a point where other jobs are going to be like, "Hey, you took that away from me." I was even thinking about, I mean, this is kind of randomly related to rights, but with the rise of influencer culture, you know how, and you and I are both trained journalists. As a photographer, my rule when I was, in student journalism was, if it was 5 people or less in a photo and you could clearly identify them, you had to get everybody's names first and last, or you could not run that picture. You had to identify everyone in that picture and get
Mm.
them to say it was
Yeah.
okay. And with influencer culture, like I just went to a convention and then I saw an influencer later, like I saw them in the waiting line. I'm like, I think that's who I think it is. Turns out it was. And I was thinking, like, as they're filming, if you can clearly identify people, but nobody's like, they're doing commentary, but they're not like running up in the crowds and being like, hey, can I use your photo in my video? You know what I'm saying? But
Hmm.
technically, that's journalism. Technically, they should be getting permissions,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
But we don't. So what's happening with those lines? As an actor, I have to sign off on rights if you want to use my likeness or my voice. As a
Hmm.
writer, you sign off on that too. You get to use my work for your project. But we've already started blurring the lines, and that was even before AI. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Hmm. No, in the respective usage, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about the scraping of the internet and whose images or words are you using to train your AI, and that's rapidly, I think, approaching some legal questions that are starting to pop up in courts and places, but I don't think it's happened in LA and Hollywood yet. But that's going to get sorted out pretty soon, I think. I was going to say the difference between how adamant the Writers Guild and the SAG-AFTRA are with the AI, usage rights, um, reflected into other industries, is basically you have to look at it as a union thing. If you don't have a union, like marketing, for example, there's no marketing union. So if you're in any factor in marketing, every company that can use AI to help automate or develop content or whatever it is for their marketing, will use it. It's going to save them time and money. But they don't have a union to go up against. There's not a bunch of production artists or graphic designers, at ad agencies that are somehow able to leverage, any kind of labor against, ad agencies or marketing companies.
Which marketing is technically also a creative field.
It is, but it
You know?
doesn't have a union.
Yeah.
Now, the art that you create, whenever you're working for a company, there's, you're a work for hire. So it's just, they can tell you what tools to use. They can tell you, what subjects to create, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you don't own any of it. You can put it in
Yeah.
your portfolio, but you can't, you can't sell something that you create for another company and you don't own it. They don't pay you residuals for it. This because you work in commercial work as an actor.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's already a big thing too. Just the fact that, the residuals, I don't, it doesn't exist anymore. That's been chipped away at over the
In the
last how many
commercial
years?
side,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just
for sure.
paid for the day and you're done.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they basically were trend setting for the entertainment side of the industry, for the
Oh.
filmmaking and TV, I guess, huh?
Well, I mean, right now you still get residuals for your TV and film work, but the thing with the streamers, which is what we've discussed before, is they're not transparent about, like, at least if it's on broadcast TV, you can tell how many times it's been watched. They had Nielsen ratings and stuff like that. But with
Mm-hmm.
streaming, you're just reliant on what the streamers tell you. Stranger
Mm-hmm.
Things might not actually be as popular as we all think. They just tell us it is. You know what I mean? Obviously, it is popular, but I'm
Right.
just using that as an example. You just don't know. And the only way that we can tell is because now they are going to advertising dollars, and ad people need to know stats. So they need to know, well, if I put my money on Stranger Things versus this other show, what kind of bang for my buck am I getting? So
Mm.
that's where the transparency is coming in. But yeah, I mean, even the residuals, I should look this up. I remember when I first came out here, there was a gentleman who used to run a commercial class. I audited it actually, and I believe he was like mostly or just strictly a commercial actor, and he made a lot of money in the 90s doing union commercial work because of the residuals. And like his spots would get used. So, a little bit of education here. If you do a union commercial, you get paid for the day, and then you get paid for like a 13-week run. And
Mm.
then if they want to reuse it, they pay you again for the 10 or 13-week run. If it's a popular commercial, remember back in the day, like in the 90s, and they would just run the same commercial over and over and over, and you would be like,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this for 2 years. Every 13-week cycle, you're getting residuals off that. It's a nice gig. And so this gentleman worked commercials in the 90s and basically made a living at it, bought a house off it, and so he was teaching actors how to do the same. And then somewhere around like maybe I want to say 2015, 2016, when the rise of more non-union commercials started coming up, and actors are hungry, so we took those jobs, but it started eroding the union
Mm.
foundation of the commercial work. I don't think that gentleman teaches that class anymore because
Really?
you can't teach it. I think I go out for commercials a lot with my agent. I feel like the ratio of union to non-union is like 2 to 1, 3 to 1. You
Wow.
know, it's not. There's not a lot there anymore. So
Hmm.
you can't rely on the old system. It's gone.
Yeah.
So
So there's a
and
lot at stake basically right
oh
now.
yeah, yeah. And so I understand why writers are upset, especially if the timing, because at least with broadcast shows, you knew, okay, I'll be in the writer's room from like January to May. and then, maybe I can write a film or write something in the summer, and then I'll be back in the fall. And you kind of knew your schedule, but because streaming sort of like messed that up and you don't know when, you rely on those checks. And it's not a lot. It's really not a lot. I mean, like, I see people's residuals. As an assistant, I'm not going to get into numbers, but like, if it's not being run a lot, you're not going to see a lot. I've gotten residual checks for a penny. It's not even
Mhm.
worth the stamp that they put on it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I laugh about it, and I actually like saved one. I'm like, oh my gosh, my check for like a penny. But like, yeah, you don't really get a lot unless it's like a smash hit. And even then, your mileage may vary because like it just might, after a while, like I'm sure, for example, I'm sure the Friends writers got a lot of money because it was like on syndication for so long.
Mhm.
But give it, 7, 10 years, they're not necessarily syndicating Friends all the time anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like things change. So anything that,
And Warner Brothers probably might be working on pulling it back into their streaming service. A lot of the
mm,
streamers have been canceling licensing deals as they expire to
mm,
to wall off their original content again so that they can boost their subscription rates because it's the only place you can get some of that content now.
yeah, and the other thing about that, and we've discussed this before, the funny thing to me about streamers, which I don't think they understood, and which is why the original models for Netflix and Hulu were smart for the big studios. You lack discoverability. I
Mhm.
am not going to get Amazon Prime and Paramount and what else is out there? You
Peacock.
know, Peacock and Disney, and hope to discover everything that you have out there. I'm just not going to do it. But if I turn on like, one of the big four on broadcast TV and flip around, chances are good I might find my next favorite show. Like I was thinking about that actually driving around because okay, online shopping is huge now, right? Like that's
Mhm.
probably how most people get their items. I know that's how I do it. And I have subscriptions for like, cat food or like, shampoo or
Mm.
something like that because it's easy to just set it and forget it. But here's the thing when you online shop, at least for me, I do not browse. I know exactly
Mm.
what I want. I know the brand I want. I know the frequency I need it, right? Send me that cat food every 6 weeks. I know exactly what brand. I know exactly what store to buy it from. Cool, you know? But when I
Mhm.
go in a store, I browse, I pick up this item, I'm like, "Ooh, that lipstick color looks pretty. I might buy that. I'll spend some time with it." Right? They say in marketing, and you know this from being there, if you hold an item and you're walking around the store, you're more likely to buy it. Right? The more time
Mhm.
you spend in the store, you're going to buy it. I just went shopping with my mom at Target for 4 hours. I never do that. I walked out with
Oh.
$100 worth of clothing. I never do that. I wouldn't normally do that. But she's from that old generation that likes to walk around and shop and browse and take their time. So guess what I ended up doing? But you don't do that on a streaming service, right? You're not browsing Disney, you're not browsing Paramount. But you would
Mhm.
browse on Netflix, you would browse on Hulu, you would browse on, NBC, CBS, ABC because there was a variety and you had choice and you could kind of remember channel flipping back in the day.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. And people don't realize like that discoverability is gone.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I mean, well, there's so much content now. It's hard to browse it all. It's all in different places.
yeah.
With cable TV, at least you had one long list of stuff. It was 1,000 channels or whatever, but at least you still had one list, and you knew your favorite channels were that kind of thing. Going back to broadcast, it was you had much less, you had much more limited selection. So everything was a real big deal when a new show came out. It was very highly publicized. But now shows come and go, and I don't even know they even existed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I
Hmm.
mean and at least like I remember cuz we didn't have cable growing up. We just had broadcast, but it was still 20 channels and you could flip through all of them and see what was around and I discovered a lot of shows that way because I'd flip and I'd be like, "Ooh, that looks
Hmm.
interesting." And it's just like browsing in the store. You spend some time with it, you're holding it in your hand, you're like, "Oh, that looks pretty. It jives with me." Okay, and you start watching it.
Hmm.
It's the same thing like even selling books, right? You know, I can do all the advertising I want online, but it's different when you go in a bookstore, and I know this, and I go and I look at the pretty covers and I read the back of the book
Mhm.
and I spend
Yep.
time holding the book, and then I'm like, "Ooh, I like this one." There's something to be said about, just like there's something to be said about brick and mortar, there's some, in a way, broadcast and cable and Netflix under the old model and Hulu under the old model were like the brick and mortar of TV and film.
Mhm.
And you're losing something by not having that.
One of the other stories that came out just recently was that linear TV is less than half of viewing now. So it's all streamers, have sucked up a lot of the viewing, which is still a lot of the
Linear TV,
same.
you mean like broadcast, or do you mean like
Broadcast
not
and
binging?
cable, yeah, broadcast is 20% now.
Okay.
Cable is 29, almost 30%, but under 30%. So it's less than 50% are that basically live television, model. So
Mm,
over half of people are using, streamers now to watch their viewing.
interesting.
First time that's ever happened. Yeah, back in June when Nielsen started tracking it, it was 60, almost 64% was broadcast and cable, and now it's just under 50%. And then that's subdivided. That streaming is divided across a dozen or more different, streaming channels. Peacock getting 1%, stuff like that.
Did they say what's the most popular streamer?
Yeah, actually, I was surprised. YouTube, 9.2% of all TV viewing is YouTube.
Were they counting like YouTube itself or YouTube the paid one, the paid version?
This didn't specify one or the other, just YouTube.
Oh, interesting. But like but that's a great example, because what does YouTube have?
User generated content.
Discoverability.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a
discoverability, right.
not just not, I'm not even talking about user generated. I'm saying there's multiple things that you can
Mm-hmm. You
find on YouTube. It's not, because the other ones, the
can
other
find anything on
programming is
YouTube.
is very homogenized, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like, Disney can have like all the Marvel and all the whatever, but in the end, you have a certain narrow lane because you know
Mm-hmm.
what you are getting with Disney, and you're never
Right.
going to step outside and get something more outlandish because it's not their programming.
Mm-hmm.
So, but YouTube has discoverability.
Yeah. But one thing this study showed me is that the network streaming channels, Peacock for NBC, Paramount Plus for CBS, HBO Max is Warner Brothers.
Oh, I forgot
They're
that one.
all less than 2%, like 1 to 2%.
Yeah.
You know, Hulu's only 3.6%, and that's ABC and Fox and NBC. Although NBC is was pulling out to go to Peacock. CBS
I
was
have
never
to
part of Hulu.
wonder, did they ever like release, they probably won't, but I wonder, is it cheaper to have and maintain your own app than to just license? Because I thought I read something that Sony is the only one that doesn't have an app, and
They're
they're
happy as
killing
hell.
it.
They're
Yeah,
happy
because
as
they're licensing to everybody and they're making a lot of money on it.
and they don't have
And
to
they're like,
run a system or worry about
yeah.
subscriptions or anything.
Or think about like, ooh, we need now new content and have to advertise that content to get people to stay on our
hmm
subscription base,
Right, and they
you
don't have a
know?
broadcast channel either, so they literally are
Yeah.
just content distribution. They're production
Yeah.
and distribution.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about the actual end delivery kind of thing.
Yeah. Because it's not even just creating the app, it's the maintenance of like marketing for it.
hmm
That would suck up all your money right there,
Yep.
you
hmm
know? I can't imagine it's cheap. I just can't. I'm thinking about it now and I'm just like, because you gotta
No,
like create quality content, and then you gotta like, and I know from now with my own books, the marketing is the most time consuming and money sucking part of the whole endeavor.
it's also it's more so now, but it used to be. It's harder to tell
If it's
whether you're
working.
getting your ROI nowadays
Yeah.
with tracking and stuff. You can tell on conversion rates and stuff, but it's still very hard and it's a lot of work.
But even then, like, and I'm gonna put my little marketing hat on, just speaking from my own experience. You can run a good campaign and like get people to the product, but it is so hard to convert people. It's
hmm
hard to convert into sales. And I wish there was like a magic bullet. I don't know what it is sometimes, like is it like the moon is full or something? But like there's it's hard to tell like what mood they're in when they're looking at stuff, or like why they did or just didn't pick
Hmm.
something.
This
You know
goes
what I
back to
mean?
your theory on discoverability, is
Yeah.
that the water cooler doesn't really exist anymore.
We don't have one.
We'd
Yeah.
stand around the water cooler and talk about what shows did you watch, what books did you read. It's
Mhm.
personal recommendations. Whether it's
Yep.
a coworker at work or it's Oprah Winfrey telling everyone to read your book. That's what really matters, because that's
Yeah.
how word of mouth is still one of the best ways for things to go, and that's why influencers became huge.
I mean, we kind of have water coolers still, but it's ridiculous when you're like, "Watch this show," and you're like, "Well, I don't have that service, and I'm not
Exactly.
planning on buying it," you know?
You used to be able to count on everybody having the same channels for the most
Yeah.
part.
And also, it's like, okay, like if you say, "Hey, watch," I don't know, what's popular right now? I'm not even paying attention.
Good
But if
question.
you're like, which one?
Good question. I don't know.
Yeah. But, like, okay, like, for example, if you're like, "Watch this show," and it's on Amazon Prime, and I'm like, "Cool," and I go watch it, well, you're already done watching it by the time I've watched it.
Mm,
Remember, like,
we're
at
not
least with
synced up, is what it is.
Yeah, at least with Game of Thrones, everyone was watching it at the same time, so they could all discuss it at the same time, you
Right.
know?
That was the
But,
rise
like,
of the watch parties
the
and.
watch parties. But
Mhm.
there's nothing like that anymore, you know? Because
Yeah.
everyone's watching it at different times, or they binge it, or they don't, or like
The Walking
yeah.
Dead got really big on the after show kind of thing. So
Oh, okay.
you'd watch the episode, you'd have a watch party, watch the episode, and then they'd have some of the stars of the show come on and talk about the episode with the guests, whoever Will Wheaton used to do it for one of the
Mhm.
Star Trek things. I can't remember who did the other one, but
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it, like, have there been any I had friends who used to have Survivor watch parties. Game of Thrones people had watch parties. Has there been anything
there were the
after that where people
bachelorette parties were big for a while.
but, I mean, now, currently, is anybody doing that anymore? Is there any show that people are like, "Let's all
I'm
do a
sure there's
watch
some, but
party"?
it's not as prevalent. And like you said, we're not synced up. We're not synced up on what
Yeah,
episode we're watching. We're not synced on at what time we're watching it.
yeah.
It's become so nebulous with everything just being out there that it's changed the viewing habits so much.
Which I
Hmm.
think that's something that they lost,
Hmm.
honestly. Advertisers, if you're listening.
Yeah, and you said this before about the studios, is they've gone with this technological. Netflix kind of started it, but then the other studios all got on board with this streaming, methodology of this is subscriber based, and it's really kind of it's destroyed the basic business model, and that's affected everything from writers not getting 22, 26 episode seasons of work, and actors, everybody's working these weird shorter episode schedules, and the way the residuals are calculated, the way advertising is calculated, has all been really thrown into a big turmoil because of this. And I'm sure there's a lot of studio execs who wish they could go back. They're still doing it with the broadcast networks, but that's becoming, like we just said, less and less of the pie. So this
I
has been a
mean,
really
yeah.
interesting talk.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, there's really no end in sight. Everyone's just kind of digging in their heels and waiting.
Hmm. But this episode has to end, so
Hopefully, the strike has to end too. Just
yes.
like the strike, this episode will eventually have to end.
Yes. How are you faring the strike? Are you running out of things to watch yet? Are you walking the picket lines? Or are you begging for this to be over so you can see Dune 2? Let us know. Send us a message or leave us a comment. Do follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WG Therapy, and visit visit writersgrouptherapy.com for more episodes. Otherwise, we'll see you in a couple weeks.